Donald Trump is not in charge of the United States. Okay, that is a fact.
Do you think he actually was implicated with Epstein?
If we saw who was on the lists, we would literally collapse as a society. It would cause massive disorder and chaos. You think the Israeli government are the big bad evil, Satan worshiping people that the conspiracy theorists say they are?
Showing you the brains of a child being blown out.
The mainstream media is full of shit. They lie. It's fact. It's proven.
And Jesus was a Palestinian.
But that's basically regurgitating my position. I want to know, do you have a stance?
I think Tate should be in prison, but not for human trafficking, for murder.
Perhaps the Mossad was involved in that assassination.
All of a sudden it's gone. It's erased from public consciousness. Just a guy wearing sunglasses, having interviews with people online.
The glasses, look.
There we go. We're matching right now.
Dude, there's 1,000% that was an orchestrated money play and perhaps a depopulation play.
I think we're going to do some damage together, with these clips in this interview. And welcome back to Finding Freedom, the show that empowers you to become the freest version of yourself, one critical question at a time. Joining me today is a man who, very much like myself, refuses to play by the rules. He had to carve his own path at the young age of 16 and was left to fend for himself with nothing but sheer grit and unwavering determination. Today, he's one of the most prominent and respected entrepreneurs on the face of the planet. He's worked with industry giants like Tony Robbins, Grant Cardone, Zig Ziglar, and so many more. He's been featured in Forbes magazine, Huffington Post, and pretty much anywhere that matters. He's an author, an investor, a podcast host, a philanthropist, and are you ready for this? A father of 7. And he's the CEO of Lightspeed VT. Actually, when I asked ChatGPT to generate a mascot for the American dream, it showed me an image of this man right here and produced the following image. What do you think of that?
I think it's awesome. I think it looks a little bit more like the dude from Mad Men. I think
John Hamm, are you saying?
Yeah, it looks more like John Hamm than me, but yeah, that's badass.
Yeah,
that is awesome. Send me that, would you?
100%. I'll send it to you right after, to your email. All right.
So I even got the glasses. Look.
There we go. We're matching right now.
That's right.
And when he was asked about his mission in life, he said it's to get the knowledge from the people who have it to the people who need it, and to provide clarity in a world of chaos. The real Brad Lea. Welcome to Finding Freedom, and thank you for joining the show.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So before anything else, Brad, I'm sure everyone who heard that intro is dying to know how are you able to do all of that and still find time for everything?
Well, I think time is an illusion. I think it boils down to priorities. So I just made those things a priority. And when things become priority, well, then you find the time, you make the time.
Absolutely. It's a matter of prioritizing and knowing what you want to put above what and knowing what your priority list is. 100%. Could not agree more. I want to ask you, Brad, I want to get right to the meat of everything. And I want to know from your perspective, from a freedom-loving man, what is your view on the current state of America and how radically has it changed since the new administration took office?
It hasn't changed much, At the end of the day, the hope is there, but, not really much has changed other than we have some actual leadership in the White House. I think some of the things that are changing, you won't be able to see for a little bit, but at the end of the day, I'm not one that, gets my nose in the mainstream media and looks at what's going on in, especially politically, because it really doesn't, limit my ability and it doesn't enhance my ability. So at the end of the day, I don't pay too much attention to it.
So you're doing your thing regardless of who's in office, regardless of who has control or the illusion of it, you're a steam train rolling right on ahead, isn't it?
1,000%.
So, as I said, you have 7 kids. And if you ask most parents today, it's hard enough raising 1 child or 2 children, let alone 7. So, I mean, how do you protect them from things like the woke mind virus, all of these insane ideologies, and whether there's an agenda going on or not? I would argue that there absolutely is. How'd you bring them up in such a chaotic world that wants to do nothing but destroy their morals and their values, and it wants to program them according to what they want? So how do you really protect and raise your children in this kind of a world?
Well, you lead, first of all, you be the example that you want them to see, and then you limit their exposure to the system. You limit their exposure to the narrative. I keep them off the news and out of the schools. I homeschool my kids. I hire the teacher for them directly. So fortunately, they're not exposed to that. And, again, I think the most important thing we can do as parents, if we want to, make sure our children end up is lead them, like be the example you want them to be, hold them accountable, ultimately get them out of the system.
Yeah, it seems like it's one of the only options right now. You got to take matters into your own hands, and you got to really, literally remove them from that system of indoctrination that's trying to corrupt their minds. So I want to ask you a question, Brad, and I want to ask you what you think are the most profitable businesses in the world, if you were to give 2 or 3. And I've done a bit of research and I came up with a list of 5. What do you think a couple of those are?
When you say the most profitable
industries on the planet, yes. What comes to mind?
Licensing, software, profitability, like if someone makes 99% profit margin on something, but only generates $1 a year, it technically would be the most profitable, even though it only made 99 cents. So when you mean profitable, do you mean makes a bunch of money, or do you mean legitimately profitable?
Yeah, I'm talking about, margins of profit, actual profit. Yeah.
I would say the most profitable businesses or industries is licensing. I don't know of any industry that's more profitable than licensing. What do you have? What are your 5?
I mean, that's a good one. And you said software, and that's
Well,
actually
you license software. So licensing is kind of an umbrella for a lot of things. I have a software company and we license our software, and I think licensing is probably one of the most profitable industries there are. You can make up to, in some cases, 100% profitability.
It's insane, I'm sure. And I'll take your word for it. I mean, you're where you are for a reason. So I'm definitely not going to argue against that. I mean, and you said software, it's actually number 3, technology. But here's where I'm going with this. And so number 1 is finance and banking. Number 2 is medicine and pharmaceuticals. Number 3, like I said, is technology, big tech. As you mentioned, software. Then we got energy, oil, gas, and electricity at number 4. And then number 5, war, the military-industrial complex. So for me, what caught my eye is number 2 and number 5, medicine and pharmaceuticals and the military-industrial complex. And I don't know if you would agree with this, but I feel they are some of the most corrupt and filthy industries on the planet. And here are some statistics. There are studies that go along with this. But over the past 100 years, if you were to give an estimate of how many people died as a result of, let's say, medicine, whether it's medical malpractice, pharmaceutical drugs and side effects and stuff like that, what do you think in terms of profits? How much money was made over the past 100 years and how many people were killed?
Well, that's going to be a huge number on both sides. They
Absolutely.
probably made it in the trillions,
Absolutely.
and obviously hundreds of millions of people died because of it.
Absolutely. So the figures I have here are from medicine. 50 plus million are killed. I would say that's a very conservative number. I would agree with you, and I would say it's in the hundreds of millions. And in terms of profits, $250 trillion over the past 100 years. And again, I would say that's a conservative estimate, and I would predict that it's way beyond that. And then if we go to war, more than 150 million were killed over the past 100 years. And in terms of profit, it's more than 150 trillion. And once again, I would say it's much more than that. So my point is that maybe we chose the wrong industry. I don't know. Is it too late to switch over? But I would say war and medicine are two of the most profitable industries, not only right now in our current time, but in the industry, in the history of humanity. And one
Yeah,
profits
but
from.
see, I disagree. I
Oh
disagree.
yeah, what's your
Well,
perspective?
number one, you're talking about collective profitability. Like I said, if you make 100% profit on a dollar, well, that's more profitable than a 250 trillion for medicine because they don't make stuff for free, although there is massive margin in medicine. But the deaths, the lives that were taken for both of those would mean that's the least profitable. Like there's no value you can put on those lost lives.
Of course.
If you take 200 million people, and what's the cost of that, and how much could they have earned, and what could they have changed if they didn't fall victim to those two industries? So if you weigh all of that, well, then I think those two are the least profitable industries, in fact. But I see what you're saying, and
Yeah.
I would agree that they're definitely profitable industries. I just wouldn't be a part of them, no matter how much I made.
Yeah, of course. I mean, of course, there was quite a bit of sarcasm in what I was saying in terms of changing industries and stuff like that. And it's a pretty cynical view I do have. And of course, I believe they are some of the filthiest, industries that are presently existing on our planet. And to be honest, they need to be dismantled in one way or another. And yeah, they've caused way more harm than good, in my opinion. But yeah, I would say war and medicine are two of the most profitable industries in human history in terms of purely making money. Regardless, they put profits over the well-being of people. And one profits from death, and the other profits from delaying death and prolonging suffering. Pretty much, war sells destruction, then reconstruction, and medicine. I could talk about that for days, but that's a topic for another day. But I want to go to something that I've seen you say in an interview. You said that lawmakers and politicians on both sides are criminals, and I agree with you 100%. And I believe the whole left versus right thing is nothing more than an illusion. And they're two sides of the same coin in order to distract people from who the real culprit is. And if we want to talk about the deep state, we want to talk about the elites, shadow governments, however, whatever you want to call them, there's absolutely an incredible amount of corruption that's going on. And they give you the illusion of choice. Here are your candidates. And you're stuck with these, and you have to pick your poison. Basically, maybe there are varying degrees of corruption with each, but ultimately they seem to lead to the same destination. And I believe like they have a lot in common. These days, there's a lot being talked about how the Zionist ideology is a road, or is a destination that a lot of these roads lead to. I don't know. What are your thoughts on all of that? And why do you think this became such a prevalent talking point online today?
Well, because people are attracted to drama. It's a way to keep us divided, and it gets views and clicks and comments and engagement. So they use it to fuel the algorithm and the revenue and the consumerism. What do I think of it? Again, I mean, it's an unfortunate fact. But again, I try not to pretend that I know everything just because I read something on the internet. There's people that believe in the conspiracies, and then there's people that don't. And then when the conspiracies end up becoming true, there's still people that don't and would refuse to, no matter if they were hit in the face with it. So unfortunately, again, there's some evil forces in the world, man, and they're out for profitability. They do not value human life and human rights. And I think the more you focus on that, the more sucked into it you get. So I try not to focus on it. You'll see me make a comment here and there, but again, it's not something that I obsess on every day. I like to look at the positive. I like to look at the bright side. I like to choose to operate in a frequency and an energy that you might find in heaven. I call it heavenly energy. And when you
I
want
like that.
and choose heavenly energy, you look at those things and you just, find the bright side in all of it and move on down the road. So I'm not one to sit there and, figure out and go down rabbit holes too far. So I'm not a good candidate to get my opinion. I mean, if you have a specific question about something, I'd give you an opinion. I'm very vocal about
Yeah.
my opinions.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
again, when you say, what do you think of it? I don't. I don't really think much on it because number one, I don't think it's in any individual's control, right? The deep state, the cabal, the pharmaceutical companies that are keeping us sick, our healthcare system, which is really uh, not about healthcare, it's about profitability. Our education system needs an overhaul. Our government is obviously, in most cases inept, at times corrupt. And I personally can't do anything about it. So I look at the options that I do have control over, which are my thoughts. So your mind is something hopefully you control. And so I don't choose to use it to focus on the conspiracies and the evil. I use it to focus on the solution and the help, if that makes sense.
That's a pretty wise perspective. And, it's pretty mature and humble of you to say, I'm going to focus on what I have control over. And that's exactly what I'm going to put all of my energy towards. I'm going to focus on building my empire and I'm focused on my destination. So that's absolutely a wise decision to make. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about the insanity of 2020, that whole period of time, that dystopic era. And there were all of these nonsensical laws like the experimental jab and locking people down in their houses like slaves. And if we were to talk to our ancestors about it and say that one day that would happen, they would call us crazy. But ultimately, it did happen. And they weaponized certain terms like anti-vaxxer. And anyone who remotely questioned any of it was thrown this label at, and these terms continuously were used as weapons against them. And they always conveniently come with these weaponized terms, whether it's anti-vax or whatever it is. And I look today at something like what's going on, a genocide in the Middle East or whatever the case may be, and then they use terms in a similar fashion. If you want to criticize a certain ethno-state in the Middle East, the size of New Jersey, you're going to be called an anti-Semite. I don't know. Is it just me that saw this comparison, or do you see the comparison as well, or am I reading too much into it?
Well, I definitely see the comparison. But again, I'm not over there and I'm not educated enough on the situation to assume that I know what's going on. You have to assume that if the mainstream media lies, then it lies. So you can't just all of a sudden, believe it just because it's saying something that you want to be true. So like, you know, the whole Israel Palestine conflict has been going on for years, and you will hear both sides, and I don't know which side is telling the truth. I don't know what's going on, but when you see media that says, "Hey, look, the Jewish, are in charge of this, that, and the other thing. And isn't this crazy? And look what they did. And well, now you go look at the Palestine side, or that is the Palestine side. Then you go look at the Israeli Jewish side, and it's like, well, no, they did that. That's not true. So it's like, how do you know what's true? I don't. I don't know what's true. So it's hard for me to judge. So when someone says, what side are you on? I'm not on any side. Okay. I'm not involved. How about that? Like, I don't need to have an opinion and I don't need to pick a side. Okay. I feel badly for whoever is being oppressed and killed and treated unfairly. But which side is that? I don't know. Now, with that being said, I do see the comparison. I do say, that is interesting. I do say, wait a minute, that doesn't make much sense. Well, wait a minute, like that's not very cool. But dude, you got to realize, I'm also aware that you don't know the truth. So unless you know the truth, how can you make a judgment? So therefore, I don't make a judgment.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And
What do you think? What do you think's the question?
oh,
You think the Israeli government are the big bad evil, Satan worshiping people that the conspiracy theorists say they are, or do you believe that they're just? Which side do you fall on?
so I'm going to go back to a point you made about you can't believe everything you see on mainstream media, and I absolutely agree with.
You can't believe anything.
Pretty much, yes, anything. I stand
Yeah,
corrected.
listen, but exactly, like, dude, it's not, you can't believe everything. You can't believe
Exactly.
anything.
Exactly.
The reason why is because the mainstream media is full of shit. They lie. It's fact. It's proven. So you cannot now determine which one's a fact and which one's a lie. So you have to assume that it's all lies. That's why I don't really pay attention to it, because some people, or I should say most people, they will say that the mainstream media is lying because they don't agree and they've chosen a side and they're not open to new information about the particular subject. So they will say, "Oh, the mainstream media is lying. It's a narrative. It's this evil cabal." But as soon as the mainstream media reports something that they agree with, then all of a sudden the mainstream media is the truth, and that's why you need to believe it. Well, no, that's called confirmation bias. You're looking for things to confirm your beliefs. I'm I like to believe more elevated than that, which means I'm higher consciously. I understand that you don't know the facts. And if you don't know the facts, how can you weigh judgment? So again, I'd like to say, oh yeah, those damn Israelis, and then oh, those Palestinians. And it's like, listen, I'm smart enough to realize I don't know the truth. And if I don't know the truth, who am I to judge? Like, it's unfortunate. I have empathy, but is it even true? Just like back when Trump was during his first presidency, you know, a lot of people would say he was ruining things. They're doing it again, right? The people are like, "Oh, see, now don't you regret your vote?" And I'm like, "Nope, I don't regret my vote." Um, but he's up to this and he's doing this and the tariffs are going to ruin us and blah 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 blah. It's like I don't know it to be true. Then I see reports that he's doing killer. Well, I don't know that's to be true either. So again, when people say, "Well, are you happy with him?" I don't know if I'm happy. I can only tell what's right in front of me today, and I am 100% certain nothing he's doing is going to like stop me from being able to do what I'm here to do. So at the end of the day, I can't believe the mainstream media. That's the bottom line. So when someone brings up,
I
what
agree
do you
with
with
you.
you.
what do you think of this Middle East thing? Don't know. What do you think of Putin? Have no idea. Now give me the facts and make sure that they're facts, and
And then
Then
we
we
man,
can
can
talk.
talk.
I will choose a
Yeah.
side instantly.
Absolutely. No, I definitely appreciate your humility. And sometimes people claim to know everything when, nobody knows everything. But just to answer your question, since you did ask me, and I would say I'm grateful for independent journalism, authentic, people on the ground. And I'm grateful for things like social media, although it could be weaponized and, they love to censor people who are talking about anything they deem controversial. And we've seen that. But I think, especially since 2020, the mainstream media's hand has been exposed big time. And they've showed us their cards, and they've showed us how manipulative and how they love pushing propaganda in order to serve a certain agenda. So when I see independent voices on the ground showing us exactly what's happening, like for example, in Palestine, there are independent journalists, people showing you limbs being cut off, showing you the brains of a child being blown out. They're showing you the destruction. And at this point, I think it's beyond reasonable doubt that there is absolutely a genocide that has been taking place over the past year and a half plus, and it's still going on. And it's something that started 76 years ago, and they want to keep on going and harping on about October 7th, when they came and ethnically cleansed the entire place. And if you look into the history and how many massacres happened in Palestine, which is the birthplace of Jesus Christ himself, and Jesus was a Palestinian, so I can't deny what's going on. I have firsthand experience of friends who've been there. I've done enough research, and then there are so many people, whether it's Candace Owens or Dave Smith, Norman Finkelstein. There are so many prominent voices and credible people who talk about this issue. And even Dan Bilzerian came out and he started talking, even when it's at such a detrimental cost, because for whatever reason, the only issue that you can't talk about online is God's chosen people. The only thing that's a red line and that you're going to get canceled for these days is you're even if you're peacefully protesting in a university, you're going to get deported. And we've seen all of these stuff. So, and then if you go back in history, all of the times Israel was involved in different stuff like the USS Liberty, JFK files came out with Israel and Mossad written all over it. So I would say it's extremely hard to deny and look away from all of that. But that's my opinion. I understand not everybody maybe has enough interest or is willing to go that deep, and I can't blame other people. Everyone has their own thing going on, but I mean that's just my opinion in a nutshell. But we could move on. we could move on to another topic. In terms of the Trump assassination attempt last year, I found it pretty interesting that it was just buried and erased from public consciousness. And even though I loved finding out what happened with JFK and I really wanted to know, but I'm like, that's pretty weird. Why wasn't there just a sitting president that, they tried to assassinate less than a year ago? I don't even remember Trump himself speaking on it, maybe once or twice, but all of a sudden it's gone. It's erased from public consciousness. So why do you think that is? What's your speculative opinion, if you have one?
Well, I think an attempt was made on his life. That's a fact. Um, the JFK files prove that the government and the CIA and, perhaps the Mossad was involved in that assassination. To know that there's corruption is a fact. But again, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what happened, but I know that, he didn't fake it, if that's what you're asking. And why it's erased from the public consciousness, I don't think it is. I think we all remember it. Matter of fact, I think it helped him get elected, or reelected, I should say. When he, I have people saying that it was staged. It's like, come on, man. That makes no sense. And then I have people saying that it was, inside job. Well, again, it seems to be a little peculiar, but same thing goes back, man. Who knows the truth? So what's the specific question you have? And I'll give you my specific opinion about it.
Yeah, fair enough. And, I'm not saying it's not the hill that I'm willing to die on and say, this is what happened or that, because just like you, I'm just an outside spectator. I'm just a guy wearing sunglasses, having interviews with people online. I'm just vocalizing certain opinions, and I'm speculating. That's all we could really do. We don't have the full picture. We can speculate. We can try to guess, but it would be foolish of me to say, this is what happened. The truth is, I don't know. Just like you, just like anybody in the general public, we're just watching and observing. So
Yeah, but that's basically regurgitating my position. I want to know, do you have a stance or a question? Like, in other words, do you have a specific question as to what I think happened? Because I don't want to come across like, oh, Brad's all, he's politically staying out of it. No, 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 no. I've got my thoughts and I've got my opinions. I just also recognize that we don't know shit. And if you don't know shit, you can't pass final judgment.
yeah.
You can't have a final answer. But ask me a specific question, like about it, and I'll tell you what I think about it. So like maybe you get that viral clip.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
Our first line ever of Finding Freedom merch just dropped. And yeah, it's awesome. I know because I designed it myself. But let me be clear. This isn't just a fashion statement. It's a statement of truth and empowerment. A statement that says you refuse to conform to the clown show of modern mandates and puppet string society. That you're not here to bend the knee to any regime, any narrative, or any delusion that insults your intelligence. This is for the free thinkers, the ones who speak up, even when it's inconvenient, the ones who question, challenge, and push back, even when the herd, the mob, and the entire system tell you to sit down. This is a signal to the world that you're able to have a mind of your own, believe it or not, that you've got limits and you're not afraid to show them. And if you're gonna wear a shirt or drink from a mug anyway, you might as well use it to spark genuine, meaningful conversations, awaken curiosity, and possibly trigger a few sheep along the way. Click the link and get your merch now, and let the world know that you are finding freedom.
Back to the program.
I want us together to murder the algorithm, as you said. I loved that expression that you gave. You talked about Tate, and you said, I think Tate should be in prison, but not for human trafficking, for murder, for murdering the algorithm. I really loved it. And yeah, he absolutely did murder it. And but I think we're going to do some damage together, with these clips and this interview. And for me, what's important is building like a good dynamic with my guest. And I'm not just looking at this one conversation. I'd love to hopefully build a meaningful connection. But in terms of, I think you made it pretty clear. Like you said, you don't think it's staged. You don't think it's an inside job. So who do you think was behind it?
The deep state.
For what purpose?
Because they didn't want Trump to be a president again. I think it was the deep state. I don't think they wanted Trump to be president again. And I think if they publicly assassinated him, Kamala would have the presidency.
Yeah, that's a valid speculation. And, anything goes. It could be any one of these theories, if you want to call it that. But I think the word conspiracy theorist, I believe it was even fabricated by the CIA. I don't know if it was in the 60s. It was last century. And they came up with the term conspiracy theorist, just to discredit and pretty much silence any type of opposition that was coming their way. So,
do you know that in and of itself is a conspiracy theory?
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, the CIA, I think, was put together, in the 60s? And the term and the idea of conspiracies and the use of the word theory in relation to those existed long before the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I mean, I think they didn't invent the concept of a conspiracy or the term conspiracy theory. I think they just played a significant role in popularizing its use as a tool to discredit people. So again, when people say they made that word up, and again, that's a conspiracy theory. And quite frankly, it's not even a true one because they didn't invent the name conspiracy theory. But then again, that's just my opinion. They may have, but I wasn't there. I don't know it to be a fact. And that's the craziest part about all these theories. Okay, whether they're conspiracies or theories, to me, what's the difference? A conspiracy means there's something, there's a hidden agenda, a secret agenda behind the idea. Well, that's why I tend to believe that when I hear a conspiracy theory, I tend to believe that, hey, I see the agenda. I mean, the agenda to me is like obvious in a lot of these. You know, you don't make money curing cancer. Okay, so when several cancer doctors commit suicide because they've claimed that they've got a cure, and all of a sudden all these, holistic doctors die coincidentally, and you never find the cure for cancer, but they all claim to have it and then they die. Like that, well, pharmaceutical is killing them. Dude, that's easy to believe. Why? Well, because if I was making $1 billion a month on a medicine that I have, and you come out and show me that frickin' some cheap other medicine cures it, well, I think it might be in my best interest to silence you. Like that's just logic,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a conspiracy. It's probably what happens, So at the end of the day, go up against a massively wealthy person, and then that person does something to erase you or silence you or kick you off their platform, so you can't be heard or seen with any kind of real exposure. That's not a conspiracy. That's a probability. In other words, like a lot of these conspiracies aren't necessarily conspiracies at all. They're logically probably the case.
Hmm.
Now, nobody has the truth and nobody will ever know the truth in a lot of them, which is why they're called conspiracies. And as soon as you label someone a conspiracy person, I think the CIA and others have made it to where that means tinfoil hat and not that bright. When in reality, I think it's the opposite. I think if you are open-minded enough to realize that there could be some nefarious involvement here, I think it's foolish if you think there isn't.
That's fair. Fair enough. So do you think that we actually are free? I mean, or do we just have the illusion of freedom?
We just have the illusion of freedom. Now, again, when you say we, I'm talking about the people.
Yes.
Yes.
Um, do you have to wear a seatbelt? Well, technically you do. Well, you don't have to. You just have to be willing to pay the consequences. So we're not free in that regard because we have rules and we have limits and we have, boundaries and consequences. But that also what creates civility, and you want to live in a world where there's rules and regulations and boundaries. You don't want real freedom. People think they want real freedom, but real freedom would be chaotic and it would be not a world you want to live in.
Yeah. I
I'm
see
talking
that.
about I'm talking about real freedom. Real freedom is anyone can do anything they want. You don't want that. You don't want to live in a world
You
like
don't
that.
want anarchy.
That's what it would be. It would be survival of the fittest or the smartest or the most willing to adapt. There would be no uh, morals and ethics and it wouldn't be like you think it would be. A lot of people want to talk about freedom, but they don't truly want freedom, because freedom, if you really think about it, it means you can do anything you want. So do you want to live next to somebody who can do anything they want? I don't. I want everyone to agree that, hey, you know what? Let's not kill each other. Okay, let's make that a rule. Boom. No, you're no longer free.
Yeah, I definitely see what you mean.
In
Anytime,
terms of,
anytime there's a rule, well, then that's the opposite of freedom. So when people say I want freedom, I know what they're talking about, and I agree with what they want, but it's not actually freedom they want. They want they want rights.
No, I get you. I get you, brother. In terms of Dr. Rashid Buttar, I don't know if you mentioned him right now or it's just stuck in my mind from another interview you had. And actually, I had an interview with David Morin last week, who I believe might be a connection of yours, maybe a friend of yours, solid dude. And he actually told me that he also interviewed Dr. Rashid Buttar, but I didn't really get the chance to ask him about that interview. So in a nutshell, what was your impression of Dr. Rashid Buttar? I believe, PBD had him on his podcast, and I saw it right at the beginning of the pandemic, and it was taken down like that. I believe your interview with him was taken down like that as well. Anyone who was speaking any type of truth was censored right away. So how was your interaction? And again, maybe you don't like the speculative question, but he did say he was poisoned, and I just wanted to know if you had any thoughts about that.
Well, again, I got to know Rashid very well, and he did say he was poisoned, and he did say they're going to get him, and coincidentally, he died. So again, how many coincidences need to happen before it's no longer a coincidence? But yeah, I mean, he stood up and said basically that it was all nonsense, and a lot of the stuff that they were doing was, for nefarious reasons. And he was kicked out of a lot of different medical circles where he belonged in, and so did a lot of other doctors, not just him. And there's a lot of other doctors that mysteriously died, not just him. And I think, again, like I said, it makes sense that, somebody making billions of dollars is not going to allow an individual to publicly ruin their business. I think big money like that corrupts. They say, I don't know who said it, but somebody said, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Meaning, like, dude, listen, if I'm making billions and billions and billions and billions, and some pipsqueak doctor comes along and wants to go against the program, even if he's right, even if he's telling the truth, that's going to literally cost me my billions of dollars, I can understand why someone says, hey, someone's got to take that guy out, period. Just like Andrew Tate, they're saying that he did all this and they put him in jail, and him and his brother Tristan are, persecuted for this reason and that reason. Well, again, I mean, there's probably some truth to the fact that they're not, the most, they're not perfect. In other words, they're not angels. They ran a freaking webcam company, so again, and they're not claiming to be angels either. But to say that all of a sudden, they need to be put in prison for the rest of their life because people claimed that they were trafficking humans. When you think of human trafficking, okay, you think that people are being chained up, locked up, sold on the open market, hidden in trucks and moved to locations where they're, bound. And like, again, that's what I think of when I think of human trafficking or child trafficking. I think of, bondage and the worst. When in reality, the things that they're saying that they did, which was technically human trafficking, if you go look at what they say they were doing, like they said that they were doing it because, you ever heard of the lover boy?
Yes, lover boy method. Yeah.
Yeah, the lover boy method. So it's like, listen, if I can talk a girl because she loves me into going across state lines and, you know, performing sexual favors for somebody, that's not trafficking. It's definitely not an angel, and I don't agree with that. You shouldn't be involved. But at the end of the day, my point is, listen, the narrative is out there, and who controls the narrative? 9 times out of 10, the media. Why? Because they have the attention of people. So if I get on the media and I start saying Israel's evil, and they own the media and they shut me off the media, well, now nobody can hear me. There's people that die every day that you're unaware of. Okay, there's people that are dying right now that you're completely unaware of, and you're never going to hear about it. Why? Because it's not on the media. They're not making a big news story out of it, which means we individually know very little of what's really happening in the world. So all you have to do is use that knowledge, that common sense, that reality, and realize who chooses what we hear and what we don't hear. Well, the media. Well, who owns the media? trace it up to who owns the media, who owns the news channel, who owns the radio stations, who owns the social media platforms. And once you realize, oh, I see, then you're like, well, now you're a conspiracy. No, it's not conspiracy. It's logical. Just like I said one time, when they were talking about social media, they shouldn't have the right to silence people and cancel people. Again, dude, don't tell me what I can do with my platform. If I have a platform that has billions of people on it and I see somebody teaching whoever wants to learn how to mutilate a child or an animal, I don't like that. Get off my platform. Now everybody's like, no, you can't do that. Yes, I can. It's my platform. And if you truly believe in freedom like I do, well then, and not the freedom we just discussed, but the freedom you were referring to, well then, yes, I do have the right to shut you up. I don't like you, what you're saying, and it's my platform. Now, what I truly think is the government should have its own connected social media platform that cannot be controlled. Why? Because it's the government's, and the government shouldn't be able to do it. Why? Because it's in our Constitution. We have the right of speech. So if there were a government Instagram or a government Facebook, you know what I mean? Like everybody was on, that should be the open forum, right? That should be the digital global town square. And you should let everybody say anything they want and then let the individual who hears it agree or disagree. Like that would be cool. And I would join that platform. And I don't care if somebody's offending me by calling me names or doesn't like my race or whatever the case may be. I would say that platform should have 100% open, free communication. So if you get the haters on there and the KKK and the freaking anti-Semites, and leave them alone. Like, or hear what they say and you can identify them at least. Like, why? You know what? I would rather know that my neighbors are racist than not know.
I'd rather be stabbed in the stomach than be stabbed in the back. I'd rather see the shot that's coming to me rather than, somebody give me candy-coated poison and empty words and all of this garbage and then snake me and literally stab me in the back. I think that's just the kind of person I am, and I think you're similar. You'd rather know who your enemy is rather than have an enemy disguised as a friend. And
I would just want truth and discernment. If you give me the truth, I can handle it. So if the truth is this guy's a racist, or this guy doesn't like this or that, or this guy thinks this about you, great. They've got the right to have any opinion they want. I've got the right to try and change that opinion or to ignore their opinion. But for the social media platforms to cancel people and remove their accounts because they went one way or the other, people think is unfair and it shouldn't be allowed. I disagree. Why? Because I'm truly a patriotic person where, dude, that's their platform. Like, you don't get to determine what that guy can do. He built it. It's his. If he wants to keep off people, he should be able to. Why? It's his, man. Just like, I built this company. If I don't want to hire, for example, a female, I shouldn't have to. Why? It's my company, man. Don't tell me I have to hire certain people. But if I'm like, let's say racist, where I won't hire anyone but a white dude. Well, again, I should have the right to do that, but you can also have the right not to patronize my business or whatever the case is. In other words, at least you can see them. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
You know that that's what they are. Like sometimes casinos will say no smoking in the property. Well, here in Las Vegas, a lot of times smoking comes with gambling. Well, those businesses, they had the right to say no smoking. Well, guess what happened to them? The public stopped going there because if you don't smoke, you probably don't gamble. So they were making a rule for the non-smokers that were bitching and moaning, and the smokers quit going. And that's their customer. So guess what? Soon enough, there was smoking allowed again. Well, I don't think the company did anything wrong other than listen to the whiners. They should have said, listen, if you don't like the smoke, don't come into the casino. Remember in restaurants, I don't know how old you are, but I remember in restaurants where you could walk in and they'd say smoking or non-smoking.
oh yeah, there are certain parts of the world that you still have that. Um, but yeah, I
Well,
guess
you should be able to. You should be able to. You should be a restaurant if you're like, hey, listen, I'm a restaurant and I'm allow smoking. But the laws changed, and if you are a restaurant, you can't allow smoking. And by the way, I don't smoke, so I'm not wanting a smoking restaurant. I'm just saying, like, that is not cool. Why? The dude built a restaurant and wants to offer smoking. The owner should have the ability to offer not or offer smoking and let the individuals decide whether they want to go into that business on their own. Don't try to decide for people. Like if I want to get the, let me get it. If I don't want the, don't worry about it. Now, again, keep in mind, folks, when it boils down to that whole vaccine, and no, I did not get it, and no, I wouldn't have got it no matter, well, I wouldn't say no matter what, but I wouldn't have got it. But let's pretend people were dropping in the street. Everybody stopped the spread, and it was deadly, and it was spreading fast, and the whole population was going to die unless everyone got back. Well, then absolutely everybody should be. And I believe that everybody that didn't want to be would have the right not to be. Why? Well, because that's their choice. That's the freedom I'm talking about. Where, well, they're going to hurt us all. No, they're not. If the stops it, well, then who cares if they're unvaccinated? They're the ones that are going to die. You see what I'm saying?
there were so many logical fails in that whole thing, and they instilled fear. They locked people in their houses. They instilled fear through the media every single day. They isolated people, and then
Yeah,
they
they
said,
they didn't lock you. They didn't lock anybody in their house. They advised people to stay home. They didn't lock you in your house.
but so many places across the world, you would get you would absolutely get a fine for leaving the house. There were even people, here in Canada, it was even more draconian than the States, and there were so many bizarre things going on. Like, for example, people who would be gathering in their backyard. A neighbor would call the police and rat on their neighbor like a little Karen and tell them this guy is meeting up with his brother in his backyard, and they'd come and give him a fine. I believe they were absolutely forced. They locked people down because they literally called them lockdowns. You know what I mean?
Well, again, just for the record, though, I mean, I am on your side with that.
Yeah.
I didn't appreciate or like how they handled anything, but for a minute, assume that it really was deadly. Would your position still be the same?
That's up for debate for sure, but my problem is with the forceful element, because even if we're talking about and you brought a beautiful analogy the other day when I watched a lot of your podcast, and I was like, you brought the analogy of a peanut, and if you gave the entire world peanuts and you force them to take peanuts, there's a percentage of them that would die. So there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all cure or drug, or that just doesn't work across the human population.
Dude, there's 1000% that was an orchestrated money play and perhaps a depopulation play. Well, that's yet to be seen. But 1000% that was a politically controlled scam. 1000% a scam. There were people getting paid off left and right. And what it should do is wake people up and make you realize there are truly people running the world that you have no clue who they are, and they're not the president, and they're not the prime minister, and they're not the freaking people that you think they are. It's not the king and the queen, whoever's ruling in your neck of the woods. They're not in charge, okay? They answer to other people. Period. Donald Trump is not in charge of the United States. Okay, that is a fact. He is the excuse me, he is the illusion that he's the person in charge, but he's not. Okay, who's really in charge? I don't know, but it's not him. Okay, and it's not the Congress, and it's not the government. The government is an illusion of of power. It's like there's somebody else pulling the strings. And you know why they pull the strings? Money. Okay, money is what rules 99.99% of the shit you see, and they're like, wait a minute, just follow the money. 8 billion people were supposed to get vaccinated, right?
Yeah.
And I think they said 2/3 of the population were vaccinated. Okay, 2/3 of 8 billion people would be 6 billion people, wouldn't it?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, let's say 6 billion people. How long would it take to produce 6 billion doses?
A long time.
How long? Use Chat GPT if you got it handy. Hey, Chat, how long would it take for all of the medical companies, let alone only the few that did, but all of the medical companies to produce 6 billion doses?
Let's try it right now.
Hey,
Hey, chat. How long would it take to produce 6 billion doses if we're talking specifically about COVID-19? I'll let it. Okay. So it says real world contacts were first launched, blah, blah, blah. By mid 2021, about 6 billion doses were already produced. So from late 2020 to mid 2021, that's about what, 6 months? 6 billion doses were produced. So it says, roughly speaking, it took about 9 to 12 months from approval to hit that number.
Okay, so how many doses would have to have been manufactured in a plant somewhere?
A lot.
Like if you do the math, it's not possible.
Yeah.
They don't have the ability to produce that many. Even if they employed every, pharmaceutical company there was, it's not possible to produce that. 6 billion of them, bro.
It's insane. Yeah, and I even talked with Dr. Peter McCullough. He was telling me a lot of eye-opening things, some of which I already knew and some of which I was pretty shocked to hear. And there are so many prominent doctors that have been silenced and they've been shadow banned and they've been, every name in the book has been thrown at them. And these doctors who were previously considered some of the most respectable, reputable doctors on earth are suddenly overnight enemy number one of the state. It's beyond insane. And I could, this experimental jab is one of those topics that I could talk about until I'm blue in the face. And I could even dedicate an entire episode just about that. But you did bring up Trump, and you did say, he's not really in charge. Let's be honest. Anyone who has, any type of sense about them knows that he's not really in charge. Same thing with sleepy genocide Joe Biden. Any of the previous presidents, they're just the face. Now, if I want to tie that to something like the Epstein files, and again, we're getting into speculation territory, but lots of people pointed out that he was on the Epstein list possibly because he hung out a lot with him. And now if we see how he pulled out the chair for Netanyahu, lots of people said, yeah, you're reading too much into it. I don't think anything happens by chance, especially with Trump. Everything he does pretty much is deliberate. And you could see the stark contrast, for example, between how he treated Zelensky. Lots of people say that guy is on coke, and he's a little dancer. He was literally an actor. I don't even know how he became president, but you could see the stark contrast between how he was treated. And I'm not saying that he should have been dignified or celebrated. I think, the States and so many, including Canada as well, spent billions needlessly on that war that, should have ended a long time ago. But then you can compare that with how he treated Netanyahu and such respect and admiration. And it seems like he's going along with the playbook, and everything they're instructing him to do is going forward. And you have the whole AI video with the Trump Riviera in Gaza. You've probably seen that really weird AI video, and it says like they want to have beachfront properties on the corpses of dead Palestinian babies. So do you think he actually was implicated with Epstein? And do you think that's one of the reasons that we still don't have the Epstein files?
I think we don't have the Epstein files because if we saw who was on the lists, we would literally collapse as a society. All the people you thought you could trust, all the people that you thought were in charge would I mean it would cause massive disorder and chaos. Because again, I mean, like, why wouldn't they remove the list or reveal the list? Not only that, why wouldn't everyone on the list be brought in for questioning? And why wouldn't there be a massive investigation based on the list? And when someone says, well, we're not going to release the list to the public, why? Who decided that? They should be removed, whoever decided that. Like, they don't have the right to determine what the world sees. You know, if someone gets caught doing something and there's evidence, that evidence should be public information. You know, why would the evidence be restricted like that? Well, because of the names on the list are in such high positions that they're all, and by the way, it's all the people that are in charge. So again, you go to a police station to get help from somebody, and you're trying to get help from dirty cops, and the whole police station is dirty, dude. You're not gonna win. So to me, all the names on the list are the same people running things, and you're never going to see that list.
I agree with you. And I mean,
They've already destroyed half of it from what they say.
to some degree, everyone is compromised. Every politician is compromised. It just depends to which level they're compromised. And
Let's say I got arrested with a kilo of cocaine, and you're my brother, and you happen to be the evidence locker manager at the federal storage facility that stores evidence. And I call you and say, hey, get rid of the evidence that they're going to bring you for my case. And you've got the ability to do it, and we're brothers, so you do it, and it's gone, and you might get fired, and but at the end of the day, bro, it's who you know. And there's a lot of people on that list that know a lot of powerful people, including Epstein. That's why that son of a bitch got away with everything for so long, because he had pictures of people getting bent over and doing the bending over, and he had it on video. And imagine if you went to those islands and you partook in that nonsense, and you knew for a fact that they had a video of you doing some shit that will ruin your life and your reputation and your position, and more than likely prison and everything, and you were in a massive, powerful position, dude, you would leverage everything you had and used all of your power to make that list go away. Like, that cannot come out. Now imagine everybody on that list and all the power they had and all the money they had. Then you throw in the CIA and the Mossad and all these other powerful entities and shadow agencies that you've never even heard of, that are like causing, nations to fall and whole entire governments to collapse. Like, now you'll know why they're not releasing the file, because the people in the power aren't going to allow it, because their name is on it.
yeah, man.
You'd think they'd be smarter though. Like, I'd just release a list with random names and say that was the list, because who are we to know that whether the list was true or not? But to say they're not releasing it, that just causes freaking issues. If they were smarter, they would have released the list. It just wouldn't have been a true list, and no one would have known the difference.
You know what I think it is? I don't think it's a matter of them not, being smart or anything like that. I believe they're extremely intelligent, but what I think it is arrogance. They've seen that, I'm going to tie this back to the whole pandemic issue, and it was pretty much an experiment on the largest scale ever. It was, psychological warfare, whatever you want to call it, but they tested out the waters and they saw, okay, they're willing to accept all of that. They're willing to accept being masked up. They're willing to accept being forced upon them an experimental drug, they're willing to divide themselves and be conquered, and all of these draconian measures placed upon them, and they really didn't do anything. And now even no matter how much evidence comes backing up the notion and the fact that it killed so many people, it caused so many cardiac arrests, neurological disorders, immeasurable harm, people, they just don't care. They're too busy with meaningless stuff. So even when they're presented with a list right in front of them and they're like, here you go, here's the list, people are like, oh my God. Anyway, so people are way too distracted, way too self-obsessed. They're in the clouds somewhere, they don't really want to address or confront what's really going on. And that's my humble opinion. And I really don't know at this point. It's like the lesson hasn't been learned. People, unfortunately, are willing to take so much abuse, so much psychological torture, so much infringement upon their God-given rights, and they're not going to fight back. They're not going to speak up. They're just going to continue to go along with the flow. That's my 2 cents on it.
Yep. It's unfortunate, but that's true.
It is, man. But I mean, now that we know what the problem is, what do you think the solution is? We speculate, okay, these people are doing this and this is what's wrong with the world. And now what's the remedy to this ailment? What's the solution to this problem?
Find God. Well, I mean, not you, the whole world. Okay, you find
we need God.
We need God.
Isn't going to help. The solution to what you just said is everyone repents, finds God, and follows God, and acts accordingly, and the earth would become wonderful.
Amen, brother. I love that message. Now, the last thing I want to ask you, we talked about freedom, but I like ending with this question. Brad Lea, what does freedom mean to you? And do you consider yourself a free man today?
Well, again, based on what not the technicality of the word, because nobody's free by the true sense of the word. But yes, in the general sense of the word, yes, I'm a free man. And I believe that, in order to be free, you have to be able to, get rid of what's called allodoxophobia, which is the fear of other people's opinion. I mean, if you want true freedom, not by the technical sense, but true freedom, okay, you need to stop worrying about what everybody else thinks and start worrying about what you think, because people walk around every day worrying about other people's opinion and judgment. And even if they truly had freedom, that's locking them in their own cage. Just like businesses, if you're a business owner, 90% of business owners do not own the business owns them. So again, they have the illusion of freedom, but they're not truly free. So I believe, yes, I am truly free. I am not concerned with other people's opinions. However, there's always more and there's always a higher level. So I'm still working on what I call the ascension or the enlightenment to become even more free.
Love it, man. Finally, where can people find you? And do you have anything you'd like to plug? Any of your products, services?
No, you can find me just on Google, just Brad Lea, LEA. A million things will come up and you can pick any of them. The only thing I would promote to the world is, listen, man, if you guys aren't making a couple $100,000 a year or more, it's very difficult to get out of the rat race. So I invite people to come, apply to work with me at one of my companies so I can kind of coach and mentor you to get out of the rat race, give you a job, train you, and get you making some money.
Absolutely.
If they're interested in that, then go to bradlea.com and apply to work with me.
Go and do it, guys. I love following Brad on Instagram at Brad Lea, at the real Brad Lea. And we're going to put all of the handles and the links in the description and on screen. So, man, I really enjoyed it. Stay critical, stay curious, and most importantly, stay free. Man, this was really awesome. I really enjoyed the conversation. God bless you, brother.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.
I'll send you the picture right now to your email.
All right, badass. All right, man. Thank you.
God bless you, brother. Take care, hey?